Hi, my name is Joyce Slater. I am a storyteller. Now, I tell lots of stories and I try to coordinate them with the library themes, but I also have stories for holidays. I have stories for um, Halloween, like scary stories. So I take the whole summer stories of tales and tales with animal stories, with songs and stories and segues so that we have a full program. And I'm doing my programs virtually right now. You can either do them live on Zoom or outside live, or we can do a video. I am using YouTube. With the little bitty kids, I try to have a song, and since we're doing animals this summer, we might do Old MacDonald. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. This is my friend Gus. Hi, I'm Gus. I like to sing. I don't tell stories, I just like to sing. So he might come and sing a song with you. For the preschoolers, we do a lot of participation stories with hand clapping and standing up and sitting down and opening our eyes and closing our eyes and making animal sounds. For the older kids, of course, I tell animal stories from around the world. I tell stories from countries in Africa or France or England, Sweden, where my family is from, Germany. I tell Ozark stories too with animals in them. Now, I've got one little puppet here, and she never acts like a real puppet. She sits on my head. Now, this is Mrs. Chicken. I'm going to tell you a very short story about Mrs. Chicken. Mrs. Chicken thought she was the cutest chicken in the whole wide world. She would strut around. Can we all strut around? Yes. And she would go, bark, 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 bark. Oh, yes. She would look in a little puddle that looked like a mirror. I know all of you have looked in mirrors before. She would look in that puddle and she would say, "Whoa, girl, you are cute." And she would strut around. One day, it was the hottest part of summer. That puddle dried up. Let's all dry up that puddle. The water was all gone. She remembered there was a river nearby, so she started strutting to the river. She got to the river, but there were two things she didn't know about that river. She didn't know it was all shady, and she couldn't see her reflection. The other thing she didn't know was Mrs. Crocodile lived in that river. And when she went to look in the river, she couldn't see herself. She thought I might as well have stayed home. But she walked upstream and she looked in the river again. And there she saw a big green head. "Ooh," she said. "Oh no, I'm ugly. I'm ugly in the river. How could I be so ugly?" Well, she thought as long as she was there, she would just cool off her feet, and she stuck her feet right in the water. Well, you know what happened. Uh-oh. Mrs. Crocodile snapped onto her feet, dragged her across the river, threw her in her house, and said, "Yum, yum, yum. You're going to be my lunch." Mrs. Chicken said, "Uh-uh." And she had to think really fast, because sometimes when we're in trouble, we have to think fast. She thought, "I know. I'm going to tell her this. You can't eat me. I'm your sister." Mrs. Crocodile thought, But they made a deal, and that night, Mrs. Chicken laid an egg, and Mrs. Crocodile laid an egg. In the middle of the night, you know what Mrs. Chicken did? She switched eggs. She did, and when she did, oh my goodness, the next morning she was sitting on a great big egg, and Mrs. Crocodile had that little egg tucked under her. Well, they both hatched. You know, crocodiles have to kind of gnaw their way out. When that little chick came out, poor Mrs. Crocodile thought she had never seen such an ugly baby in her whole life. But Mrs. Chicken said, I like your baby. I don't mind your baby at all. We could switch babies. And then she said, looky there, your baby looks like me and my baby looks like you, so we must be sisters. Well, they agreed, and Mrs. Crocodile took her home on her back. And when she got back, Mrs. Chicken and her baby popped off of that crocodile, headed back to that puddle because it had rained, and they could see how beautiful they were in a puddle big enough for chickens, but too small for crocodiles. And you know, from that day on, they stayed away from the river. And that is a story from a country called Liberia in Africa. Thank you for listening to that story. Now, sometimes I tell stories for adults too, because adults love stories. They're a little harder stories. If they're animal stories, it might be about a personal story of a pet. It might be a relationship with my relationship with my dog or my cat, or maybe the time I helped birth a calf. If I'm talking to high school students, they want something a little tougher too, and it might be a love story that has animals in it, or it might even be a scary story. Same with middle schoolers. And, you know, in library programs, I find that we have ages from preschool on up if it's a family program, and especially if it's virtual. You know, it can be everybody in the house. So we don't want to miss out on anybody. So I try to tell enough stories and involve enough of my puppets to interest everyone. I have my big black bear. This is Blackberry. I have about 150 puppets that I can incorporate in my stories. And they are practically all animals, except I do have a princess and a prince. I have a pirate, and he might have a parrot. That's a certain kind of animal. So I hope you will consider storytelling in your library this year. I am Joyce Slater. My website is www.slatertales.com, and you can reach me by calling me, texting me, emailing me. I am doing virtual programs. I am doing in-person programs if they are outside this summer. But of course, everything depends on our health and well-being, and we want to stay safe, and we all need to stay safe. So flexibility is the word of the day. Thank you very much for listening to me and what I do. If you want a workshop, I do workshops and I coach public speakers. So if that's something else you're interested in, we can do workshops on storytelling. We can do workshops on puppetry. We can do a lot of different workshops. So contact me, Joyce Slater, Slater Tales. Thank you.